My name is Valerie Harper. I'm 36, and that Saturday was supposed to be Dad's 70th birthday picnic by the lake. The tables were piled with food, the music was blaring, and everyone was playing the perfect family. My 11-year-old son Mason reached for another burger when my younger brother Derek looked him straight in the eye and announced to the whole table, "Kids who mooch like you should wait for leftovers." The table erupted. Courtney was the first to burst out laughing. Brooke shook her head with that smug little smile. A few cousins actually clapped. Mom tried to hide her grin behind her hand. Dad just kept staring at his beer. Mason's hand froze in midair. His cheeks turned bright red. I felt the same burn I had swallowed for 9 years since my husband's accident. Something inside me snapped completely. I stood up, took Mason's hand, and walked away from the table. No words. No scene, just the sound of their laughter chasing us across the grass. By the time we reached the car, Mason was shaking. I buckled him in, closed the door, and sat behind the wheel for a long minute. That was the last family picnic I ever attended. 12 hours later, every single one of those laughs had turned into something completely different. Stay until the end if you want to hear how the sound of laughter died in that family. Like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Trust me, you'll want to see this. We pulled into the underground garage at 8:09 p.m. Mason was already asleep against the door, mouth open, one sneaker dangling off his foot. I carried him up 2 flights, laid him on his bed, and pulled the Spider-Man blanket to his chin. He never stirred. I left his door cracked and walked back into the living room. The second I set my keys down, my phone started vibrating against the coffee table like it was trying to escape. Mom, 8 missed messages in the last 45 minutes. The first one time-stamped 7:51 Val. You guys left so fast. Is Mason okay? Call me when you get home. 8:02. Your dad and I were just talking. The new depot outside Fort Worth is $2 million short to break ground next month. You still know those silent investors, right? It would be the perfect birthday gift for Dad. 8:11 honey. 8:14 Valerie, answer me. 8:19. This isn't funny. 8:25 we really need this. 8:31 please. 8:37 fine, I'll wait. I flipped the phone face down and opened my MacBook. 9 years ago, a fully loaded 18-wheeler crossed the median outside Waco and erased my husband in less than 3 seconds. The life insurance payout was $7,412,000. The family assumed I spent it on the condo Mason's therapy and the private school tuition they loved to bring up at Thanksgiving. They assumed wrong. I had wired every dollar the same week to Marcus Holt, my old SMU finance study group partner, who now ran a low-profile family office firm off the tollway. He never asked questions. He never told a soul. Starting the same month Mason turned 3, every single time Dad or my younger brother Derek needed cash fast to buy new trailers, add lanes, or keep the bank from calling a covenant, Marcus stepped in. Quiet purchases, small blocks, always through an LLC registered in Delaware that no one in the family had ever heard of. Year after year, quarter after quarter, until that Delaware LLC owned 35% of Harper Freight Lines. More than my older sister Brooke's 13%. More than Derek's 10. Just shy of Dad's 37. Tonight, that Delaware LLC answered to me and only me. I logged into the encrypted portal Marcus built for me in 2017. The dashboard loaded instantly. 35% stared back in crisp black and white. I opened a new message and typed, "Marcus, begin immediate and total divestment of all Harper Freight Lines positions. Formal 30-day notice of intent to sell to be hand-delivered by courier to Ronald Harper first thing Monday morning. No extensions, no negotiations, no contact with any other party. Complete and clean separation. Valerie, send." His reply took 19 seconds. Confirmed. Courier locked for 8:55 a.m. Monday delivery to company headquarters. All blocks are pre-cleared for rapid execution. I'm here if you need anything else. Marcus. I shut the lid and walked to the kitchen. Filled a glass with tap water I didn't taste. Stood at the window watching headlights crawl along the street 6 floors below. For 9 years I had sat at every Christmas table while Dad bragged that Harper Freight Lines was pure family, no outsiders. I had nodded politely every 4th of July when he toasted keeping it 100% Harper. I had listened while Brooke was handed the CFO title at 34, and Derek was crowned COO before he even turned 27. No one ever asked if I wanted a seat on the board. No one ever wondered where the mystery money came from every time they were about to miss payroll and suddenly weren't. They simply accepted that the widow and her fatherless son were being taken care of. I thought about Mom's favorite line, the one she always delivered with that soft hand on my forearm: "We'll always look after you and Mason, honey. That's what family does." As if looking after meant letting her youngest son publicly humiliate my 11-year-old in front of cousins, aunts, uncles, and second cousins twice removed. My phone lit up again. Another text from Mom. "Did you reach out about the $2 million yet? We're really counting on you, sweetheart. It's for Dad." I pressed and held the power button until the screen went black, set the phone screen down on the counter, and walked back to Mason's room. He had rolled onto his side, one arm dangling off the mattress. I tucked it under the blanket and sat there for a long time. Tomorrow, the formal notice would land on Dad's desk. Monday, the banks would panic. Within 30 days, my father would finally learn exactly whose quiet money had kept his empire afloat for almost a decade. I leaned down and kissed Mason's forehead. "No more waiting for scraps, baby," I whispered. This time, I wasn't asking. I was telling. Tuesday 8th, 15 a.m. sharp. My phone rang while I was pouring Mason's orange juice. Dad's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 8:15 exactly. Same name. I picked up. Valerie. His voice sounded like gravel. Headquarters. Conference room. Now. I dropped Mason at school, drove home, and parked. By the time I walked through my front door, I already had 14 missed calls and 9 voicemails. Dad's first one left at 8:17. Courier, just delivered papers. An LLC called MH Capital Holdings owns 35% of the company and filed intent to sell. The bank is blowing up my phone. Get here. My older sister Brooks left at 8:20. Valerie, if you've heard even a whisper about who MH Capital is, you need to tell us. This is life or death for the company. My younger brother Derek's left at 8:23, practically screaming. Whoever orchestrated this waited until Dad's birthday week like the gutless coward they are. I will find them and I will bury them. I deleted everything and started the kettle. 23 miles away, the Harper Freight Line's main building looked like a war room. Dad sat frozen at the head of the table, the thick courier envelope sliced open in front of him. Mom stood behind his chair, rubbing slow circles on his back, the same way she did when the company almost went under in '09. Brooke stalked back and forth on her heels, phone on speaker, firing questions at the outside counsel. Derek slammed a ream of printed stock transfer records onto the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. 35% he roared. That's more than me, more than Brooke, almost as much as Dad. How does some anonymous Delaware shell end up with that much of our company without a single one of us noticing? Brooke killed the lawyer call and collapsed into a chair. It wasn't one purchase, she said, voice tight. It was dozens. Every single time we took private cash instead of a bank loan over the last 8+ years, the same buyer was on the other side. We were so relieved to dodge interest payments we never ran full diligence on the purchaser. Dad finally looked up from the letter, eyes bloodshot. Who, he asked slowly, is MH Capital Holdings? No one had an answer. Derek kicked the leg of the table. This is a textbook hostile play, he snarled. Somebody has been squatting on this block for years, waiting for blood in the water. I'm calling every private equity guy I know. Somebody out there has heard rumors. Brooke was already scrolling through her contacts. None of the big carriers have this kind of patience, she said. This took almost a decade of disciplined buying. Mom's phone buzzed in her hand. She stared at the screen and went pale. "It's First National," she whispered. "They want all of us in their boardroom at 11. Dad closed his eyes for a long second. "Tell them we'll be there," he said. Derek stormed out, shoulder-clipping the doorframe on his way. Brooke stayed behind, spreading the transfer records across the table like puzzle pieces. "Every block is the same, LLC," she muttered. "Same registered agent in Wilmington. Same signature on file, M. Holt." Dad's head snapped up. "Holt," he repeated. "As in Marcus Holt." Valerie's old college friend Brooke froze. It could be coincidence, she said, but her voice shook. Mom shook her head slowly. "She would never—" Derek burst back in face red. "Bank just emailed," he said. "They're requiring an emergency board meeting tomorrow, and full personal financial statements from every shareholder over 5% by Friday." Dad leaned back in his chair like someone had punched him in the chest. 30-day clock started yesterday," he said quietly. "If we can't come up with roughly $24 million in cash, they can sell to anyone they want." He looked around the table at the three faces that were supposed to be his succession plan. "Meeting with the bank in 90 minutes, he said. "Everybody be ready to put houses, retirement accounts, everything on the table." Brooke nodded once, already typing. Derek punched the wall again, this time hard enough to split the skin on his knuckles. Back in my apartment, I stood at the kitchen window drinking tea I didn't taste. My phone kept vibrating against the counter with new calls, new texts, new voicemails. I left every single one unread. I knew exactly how that conference room smelled right now: burnt coffee, fear, and desperation. I also knew the moment Dad saw the signature M. Holt on those transfer records, the first real crack had appeared in their perfect family story. But they still hadn't said my name out loud. Not yet. The siege began at 9:42 Tuesday morning, minutes after they walked out of the bank empty-handed. Mom called first, voice soft and trembling. "Honey, please, just tell us what you know." I let it ring. My older sister Brooke tried at 10:03. "Valerie, this is bigger than family drama." Dad's shaking. Literally shaking. "Pick up. Decline." My younger brother Derek at 10:18 already shouting in the voice preview. "You can't just vanish while everything collapses." Straight to voicemail. By Wednesday afternoon, the texts were non-stop. Dad sent a photo of the dispatch screen, 0 new loads booked. Mom sent a crying selfie. I can't watch him lose everything. Thursday, 11:51 p.m. The doorbell rang for the first time. Mom on the ring feed, soaked from the rain, clutching a foil-covered casserole dish like a peace treaty. She rang 6 times, whispered, "I'm so sorry," into the camera, left the food, and walked away crying. Friday, at 6:27 p.m., Dad appeared alone. Stood under the porch light for 9 full minutes, hands buried in his coat, staring at my door like he could open it with willpower. He never rang, just turned and left. Saturday, 9:11 a.m., Brooke arrived with 2 to-go cups from my favorite coffee shop. She sat on the hallway carpet back against my door for 51 minutes. Occasionally, she spoke to the peephole. "I brought your usual. 2 pumps vanilla oat milk. Please, Val, just open the door." She finally left both cups and walked away. That same night, 12:13 a.m., the pounding began. Derek. I watched the black and white feed. He hammered the door with the side of his fist hard enough to make the frame shudder. "Valerie, open this door right now." His voice boomed down the empty hallway. "You think hiding fixes anything? Dad might lose the company he built with his own hands." He kicked the bottom panel once. "I saw Mason's bedroom light on an hour ago. Tell him Uncle Derek is out here freezing because his mom wants to play martyr." He waited. I stayed silent. He left the longest voicemail yet. "It television's Derek. I don't know what's going on in your head, but this has gone far enough. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Mom hasn't eaten in 2 days. If you know who MH Capital is, if you have even one contact that can help, use it. We're begging you. Family doesn't do this to family, Valerie. Call me." He hung up, slammed the door one last time with his shoulder, and left. Sunday afternoon, Courtney showed up with a bright pink gift bag addressed to Mason, inside a new Nintendo Switch game and a card that said Uncle Derek was only kidding, buddy, let's play soon. Love, Aunt C. I dropped the whole thing in the trash unopened. Monday they doubled down. Dad's truck and Brooke's SUV blocked 2 visitor spots from 7:00 a.m. They took turns buzzing every apartment on the 6th floor until security threatened to call the police. I watched from the window as they argued in the parking lot for 27 minutes before driving off. Tuesday, 1:06 a.m. Mom slid a 3-page handwritten letter under the door. I read the first line. We never meant to make you feel like an outsider, and carried it straight to the shredder. Wednesday, 2:37 a.m. Derek returned clearly drunk. He slumped against my door and spoke in a low, broken voice. I'm sorry, okay. I was a complete asshole. I'll apologize to Mason myself. Just tell me what MH Capital wants. Money, a seat. We'll give them anything. Just stop this. He stayed 41 minutes. I never moved. Thursday. Brooke left a voicemail that actually stopped my breath for a second. Dad's in the ER. Chest pains. They're keeping him overnight for tests. If you have a heart at all, call. I didn't. Friday they went nuclear. All 5 of them, Mom, Dad, Brooke, Derek, even Courtney, camped in the lobby at 6:00 p.m. They rotated, calling, texting, buzzing. Security called me 3 times. I told them I was out of town. By the end of week 2, my phone registered 389 missed calls, 247 unread texts, 34 voicemails. My ring history was nothing but their faces at every hour in every kind of weather, wearing every stage of desperation. Mason asked once very quietly why Grandma kept leaving containers outside. I told him she was just dropping off treats, and ruffled his hair. Every night I double-checked the deadbolt, silenced the ringer, poured chamomile I never drank, and sat in the dark living room. They were getting closer to the truth. But they still hadn't said my name out loud in connection with MH Capital. Not once. Week 3 started with a certified letter from First National Bank slid under the headquarters door at 5:47 a.m. Dad found it when he arrived to make coffee. Thick cream envelope, his name in raised ink. He carried it to his office, slid it open, and read the single page twice before the words sank in. Effective immediately, all credit facilities, including the $28 million revolving line, are frozen pending resolution of the announced 35% divestment. No new advances. No exceptions. He walked to the conference room, still holding the letter like it was radioactive. Brooke arrived at 7, read it over his shoulder, and went completely still. That's the oxygen, she whispered. We can't run trucks without fuel cards and payroll loans. At 9:12 a.m., the second hammer fell. An email from Apex Distribution, 29% of total revenue, landed in Dad's inbox. Subject: immediate suspension of all contracts. Dad opened it on the projector so the whole room could see. Due to material changes in ownership structure disclosed in recent regulatory filings, Apex Distribution is exercising its rights under Clause 14b to suspend performance of all active transportation agreements effective immediately. Service will resume only upon receipt of written confirmation of stable majority ownership and continued financial capacity. Required documentation must be submitted within 10 business days. Derek read it aloud, voice rising with every sentence, until he was shouting the last line. He spun and drove his fist straight through the drywall. 10 business days, he roared. We don't even have a current valuation. Mom stood in the doorway, clutching her purse like a life vest. Payroll is 8 days away, she said quietly. Brooke was already running calculations on her laptop. Without the revolver and with Apex on ice, we're short $800,000 just for next Friday's driver pay, fuel, and insurance. Dad picked up the phone and called the bank president he'd known since 1998. Speaker on. Ron. I'm sorry, the man said before Dad finished his plea. The credit committee met at 8. Until the ownership cloud lifts, no officer can override. It's out of my hands. The line went dead. Derek kicked the metal trash can so hard it dented. By noon, 3 smaller shippers sent identical suspension notices, each citing prudent counterparty risk. By 2 o'clock, the fuel card provider called Harper Freight Line's accounts moved to prepaid status effective Monday. By 4, drivers were posting on private Facebook groups, "Harper's credit is frozen. Start looking." Wednesday. Apex followed up with a 17-page demand packet, 5 years of audited financials, personal financial statements for every shareholder, over 5% liquidity proof, updated certificates of insurance, everything. Brooke canceled her kids' soccer practice and stayed at the office until dawn pulling files. Thursday morning, the yard that usually roared with engines sat half empty. Drivers stood in small knots, phones out reading the same rumors. Dad stopped going home. He kept a duffel in his office and showered in the mechanic's bay. Mom brought meatloaf no one touched. Derek hadn't slept in 72 hours. Courtney told Mom he paced the house all night on conference calls with every distressed asset fund in Dallas, offering anything for a quick bid on the 35% block. Every call ended the same. Who exactly is MH Capital Holdings and why are they selling now? No one had an answer they were willing to say out loud. By Friday, the company that once bragged about 48 straight years of on-time payroll was staring at the very real possibility of bouncing direct deposits for the first time ever. The dispatch board stayed dark. The phones stayed silent. And in every frantic meeting, every whispered hallway conversation, every prayer muttered in the break room, they still danced around the one name none of them had dared to speak in connection with the 35%. They were running out of days, and they were running out of excuses. Day 26. Friday. The phone rang at 7:06 a.m. while I was tying Mason's shoes, Dad's name on the screen. I answered this time. His voice came through cracked and trembling like an old man I didn't recognize. "Valerie, it's finished. We lost everything." He didn't wait for me. At 4 o'clock yesterday, Crestview Capital walked in with the only offer on the table. 18% of fair market value for the entire 35% block. 18%. They demanded 3 board seats and full veto rights on any contract over $3 million. If we didn't sign by 5 today, they'd walk, and the bank would start forced liquidation Monday morning. Payroll bounces Tuesday. A long, shaky breath. I signed it. I had no choice. I stayed silent. He kept going, words spilling faster. I built this from 2 trucks and a leased trailer. 50 years of my life. And now strangers own more than I do because we couldn't raise $24 million in 26 days. Because no one else even bid. His voice broke completely. I just needed you to hear it from me before it hits the news. The line stayed open. I said nothing. At 4:11 p.m., the signing took place in the same conference room where Dad once cut his own birthday cake every July. Dad sat at the head pen, shaking so badly he had to grip it with both hands. Mom stood behind him, tears dripping straight onto his shirt. My older sister Brooke stared at the documents like they were a death sentence. My younger brother Derek stood with his back to the wall, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight I could see it from memory. The Crestview sent one partner, Evan Park, late 30s, perfect suit, zero expression. He placed the final execution copy in front of Dad. Dad looked up at the family one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he signed. Ronald Harper in blue ink that bled slightly from the pressure. Page 1, page 2. 10 signature pages in total. Each stroke slower than the last. When the final page was done, Park collected the stack, slid them into a black folder, and stood. "Congratulations," he said, voice flat. "Crestview now controls Harper Freight Lines. Our directors will be in place Monday. Expect new governance protocols by Wednesday." He shook no hands. He simply walked out. Brooke was the first to speak. 3 seats and veto rights. They can block anything. They can starve us whenever they want. Derek's laugh was ugly. They just bought 35% for pocket change and the legal permission to dismantle the company piece by piece. Mom's sobs filled the room. Dad stayed seated staring at his own signature as if it belonged to someone else. Brooke pulled the revised cap table onto the screen. Crestview Capital, 35.0% Ronald Harper, 32.1% Brooke Harper, 11.7% Derek Harper, 9.0% employee and minor holders. Remainder. Dad was no longer the majority owner of the company that still carried his name. Derek finally looked at Dad. "You just sold our birthright for 18 cents on the dollar." Dad's answer was barely audible. "Payroll is 6 days away. Fuel cards are frozen. Apex has already reassigned 60% of our fleet to other carriers. The bank was ready to seize the trucks Monday. I had to keep the doors open." No one argued. They just sat in the silence of a dream dying. At 5:49 p.m., my phone buzzed once. "Unknown number. Transaction complete. $240,000 wired to your account. Pleasure doing business. Marcus." I set the phone face down, walked to the balcony, and watched the city lights flicker on. Across town, the man who once stood on a stage bragging that Harper Freight Lines would stay 100% family forever had just handed controlling interest to a private equity fund for pennies on the dollar. And he still didn't know those pennies had come from the daughter he had spent years treating like an outsider. 2 months after the signing, the boardroom felt like a courtroom. The 3 Crestview appointees sat on one side, Evan Park in the center, flanked by 2 silent partners in identical Navy suits. Dad sat at the head out of habit, but everyone knew the real power had shifted. Mom wasn't invited. My older sister Brooke and my younger brother Derek took the seats opposite the new owners, looking like they hadn't slept in weeks. The interrogation began at 9 sharp and lasted 6 brutal hours. Park opened a thick binder and never smiled once. "Revenue is down 29% since closing," he said. "Operating margins collapsed from 11 to -4. Explain." Brooke started with the Apex suspension and the domino effect on other shippers. Derek tried to defend driver retention bonuses. Every answer was met with the same flat stare. At noon, Park slid 2 spreadsheets across the table. "Option 1, he said. "We inject $15 million in new capital, but only if you execute the following restructuring within 60 days. 28% headcount reduction across terminals, 45% salary cuts for all officers and senior management, immediate sale of the Kansas City depot, and termination of the legacy pension top-up." Derek leaned forward. "You want us to fire 1,000 drivers and cut our own pay almost in half?" "Correct," Park replied. "Or option 2, we decline to fund the company misses covenant tests next quarter and the bank forces Chapter 11. Your choice." Brooke's voice shook. "Those drivers have been with us for 20-30 years. You can't just—" "We already can," Park cut in. "We control the board. We control the purse strings. You kept the name on the door. We kept the votes." Dad finally spoke hoarse and small. "You're asking me to sign termination letters for men who helped me build this place. I'm telling you," Park said. "Sign or watch it die completely." The room went dead quiet. Derek's knuckles went white on the table edge. Brooke stared at the numbers like she could will them to change. At 3:07 p.m., Park closed the binder. "You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow to deliver signed resolutions. After that, we withhold the funding and let the banks take over." He and the 2 silent partners gathered their folders and left without another word. The door clicked shut. Dad aged another decade in 10 seconds. Brooke put her head in her hands. Derek stood so fast his chair rolled back and crashed into the credenza. "They just turned us into employees in our own company," he said. Brooke looked up, eyes red. "If we fight this, we lose everything. If we sign, we keep the lights on, but we destroy the culture Dad spent 50 years creating." Dad stared at the empty seats where the new owners had sat. "I already gave them control to save the company," he whispered. "Now they want me to help them kill it." No one answered. They filed out separately, none of them looking at the others. That night, the termination list was drafted 142 names, some with 30-plus years of service. The salary cut memo was written next Dad, Brooke, and Derek taking home less than half what they'd earned 2 months earlier. By morning, the resolutions were signed in the same shaky blue ink. At 4:52 p.m., the documents were couriered to Crestview's office downtown. 15 minutes later, the wire hit $15 million, just enough to keep the doors open another quarter. Across town, I closed my banking app after watching the final Crestview payment clear into the original LLC. Then I booked 2 one-way tickets to Portland for the following week. The company my father had bragged would stay pure family forever was now officially on life support, owned by strangers who had paid pennies and demanded blood. And the family that once treated me like an outsider had just learned what it really felt like to be powerless. 4 months after the picnic, I taped the last box shut. The apartment was empty except for the echo of our footsteps. Mason carried his small backpack and the stuffed shark he refused to pack. I took one final look at the living room wall where his height marks used to climb every birthday, then closed the door without locking it. The landlord already had the keys. Outside, the moving truck waited. Portland, Oregon, 2,000 miles and 1 time zone change. I had bought a small cedar house on a quiet street 10 minutes from the ocean. No one in the family knew the address. No one ever would. The rumors had trickled in anyway through old neighbors and mutual friends. Derek and Courtney lost the house in Preston Hollow. The bank foreclosed 2 weeks after the second round of pay cuts. They were living apart now. She took the dogs. He took the leased BMW that got repossessed last month. Dad sold the big house on Straight Lane, the one with the pool and the guest house where every grandchild had learned to swim. He and Mom moved into a 2-bedroom condo near the medical center so he could be close to his new cardiologist. My older sister Brooke still went to the office every day, but the building looked half empty. Drivers had jumped ship in waves after the layoffs. The Harper Freight Line sign still hung above the gate, but the trucks rolling out now carried a tiny Crestview logo beneath it. I never answered a single message that found its way to me. Not the frantic ones. Not the angry ones, not the broken ones that came after they finally connected MH Capital Holdings to the widow they had spent years ignoring. I changed our numbers the day the truck was loaded. New phones, new carrier, new everything. Mason climbed into the passenger seat of the SUV and buckled himself in. "Are we really never coming back?" he asked, voice small. I started the engine. "Never," I said. He nodded once, pressed his shark to the window, and watched Dallas disappear in the side mirror. We crossed the Red River before lunch. By nightfall, we were in Oklahoma. By the 3rd day, we could smell salt in the air. The new house smelled like fresh paint and pine. Mason picked the bedroom with the slanted ceiling and the window that looked toward the ocean. I hung his height chart on the new wall and marked the first line, Day 1, Oregon. That night, I sat on the porch and listened to actual quiet. No sirens, no notifications, no ghosts. Somewhere behind us, the company my father had sworn would stay family forever was being carved up by men in suits who had never changed a tire in their lives. Somewhere behind us, the brother who once called my son a freeloader was sleeping on a friend's couch. Somewhere behind us, the parents who spent years treating me like a charity case were learning what it felt like to need charity themselves. I left them all in the rearview mirror without a single glance back. Mason came outside in his pajamas, barefoot on the cool wood. "Mom," he whispered. "I can hear the waves." I pulled him onto my lap. "That's our new sound," I said. He fell asleep against my shoulder. I carried him inside, tucked him in, and closed the bedroom door. Then I walked back to the porch, looked up at a sky full of stars I had never seen from Dallas, and finally let myself breathe. We were gone. We were free. We were finished.